Cyrus Red. A little, very little known band. I love that bouncy 80s metal. Happy. Anyways, whatchamacallit? Oh yeah, I'm recording. Okay, good. Good to see you all again. Did check with the library, see what was going on so I can give a report. Fine to know. Yes, apparently the books were put together or mixed together on the shelf under my name. As I was told, I wasn't saying that anyone was like not telling me the truth, but as I said, trust but verify, just make sure. Because if that's what's going on, that's an issue that, that shouldn't be happening. Because you can get confused. Students can get confused. Hey, come on in. I guess I'm already talking, so. All right. Anyways, sorry. However, I will point out, just a little bit. Oh, sorry. I will point out that on the spine of each book is the name of the course. So each book that was for this course on its spine had a little thing taped to it that said RS 2000. Okay. So if you looked at the spine of the book, you would have seen that it said RS 147, which is another course. So that should have been an indication to you that you didn't have the right book. No, that's just where I'm looking. I'm sorry, Miss Senior. All right, fine. I was looking in the back. Now I'm looking up front. All right. I'm not trying to creep anyone out. I apologize. Okay, so I'm just mentioning that, which is actually, this turned out perfectly because the reason to get a grade, of course, because I need, give you some sort of grade for the class so it can judge your progression, right? Okay, how you're doing, how you can follow instructions, how you're thinking, learning how to think. I got you, sir. Give me a minute. But also I wanted to teach you how to use the library. And this is something that maybe you've never used before. You've never had to use a reserve shelf in the library before. So if mistakes of a certain sort are made, that's good. That's all right. As long as they're not really major mistakes, like no one used any of the books. Well, some people did use none of the books, but there was a reason for that. Okay. But like if someone intentionally didn't use any of the books, that would be a different story. So remember today, why am I looking at her? I don't know. So just remember today, end of the day, get the paper in, please, revise it, rewrite what you have to rewrite, but I hope you already did get some of the books and look at them. Don't leave it to the last minute, please. Because now it won't be late unless it's beyond today, then it will be marked late. And I'm going to grade it as it is. So if you still don't have the books, I don't care who gave you what, okay? Now it's on you to know that you had the right books, right? Okay? So just make sure. Yes, Mr. Barnett, excuse me. Nothing? Okay. All right. Good to see you all again. I don't think there's anything. I will send an email out about this. I just didn't get a chance to write one. Okay. But, okay. And now that I know, as Ms. Snyder pointed out, Ms. Kelsey, especially Ms. Kelsey, because I knew how the reserve shelf was working, but, I just wasn't. And you also have to, no offense, but they have the librarian I'm not worried about, okay? But the student workers, all right? Those are the kind of people you might have to double check on. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to spit on any generation or anything like that, but they also might not know how the reserve shelf works. Because if you don't know it, and they're like you, they're students here too, maybe they're not using the library at all, they're just there to get money so they can pay off the tuition, just double check, be aware of that. Okay, enough said. Oh, no, not enough said. So in the future syllabi, I know it doesn't affect this course now, unfortunately, but for future syllabi, we'll put in something about, yeah, you got to look at the, make sure you look at the spine of the book, make sure it's for the right class, because they can mix the books together. Yeah. Ideally, they would keep everything separate. I mean, if I were running it, that's how I would do it. But, huh? Huh? Uh, Again, you wonder why I'm looking at you, because you're doing stuff, you're messing around, and then you're. All right, magisterium. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Didn't I finish this? Maybe I do want. Okay, maybe. Yeah. I'm sorry. Well, I did want to mention one thing about the magisterium. I know I was hemming and hawing about what I was going to mention. Just quickly, I'll mention it. This is from the Catechism as well, paragraph 890, which should be part of your readings. Please make sure, Ms. Casada, Ms. Kalami, Ms. Cobb, Mr. Wojciechowski, Master. Make sure you also are taking note of the readings in the syllabus because, yeah, there are questions based off of some of them and they might pop up on the next quiz. If you haven't noticed that already on some of the quizzes, you get these questions from readings that I didn't go over, but I'm assuming you read. Okay. So, yeah, the mission of the magisterium is to preserve God's people from deviations and give the objective possibility of professing the truth without error. Okay? I was kind of telling you like what the magisterium is supposed to do, which is proclaim the message of Christ, especially that Jesus has been raised from the dead by God his Father. But why are they doing that? Why is, do you have the magisterium kind of looking over your shoulder? Like Mama Bear, Ms. Mackerlane. The, because it doesn't want people to believe something that's deviant about Christ. They don't want me, but in person, in my terms, they don't want me, Matthew Dunn, Christian, to have a warped, distorted view of who Jesus is, because that might make me, false beliefs can also lead to false actions. How I treat myself or how I treat others. Okay, so sometimes you might think, it's just theory, it's all theory, it's not practical, whatever. Yeah, okay, sometimes maybe you can't always see the rubber in the road. But, if my perception of Jesus is that, he's a violent man, I came to bring a sword, not peace, right? Right? Jesus say that? Am I making it up? What do you think, Ms. Solomon? Am I making it up, or did Jesus of Nazareth really say that? He came to bring a sword. Huh? Maybe? Okay. Possible. Maybe you said it, or maybe I'm making it up. Either or. Either or. Via versa, what do you think? Am I making it up, or did Jesus actually say it? Huh? Okay, well, do you trust me? So do you think I'm telling you the truth when you said that? Okay. Yeah, why would I make something up? When I do that, when I try to trick you already, haven't I tried to trick you in this class already and make stuff up and say things that aren't really true and then see what you know or don't know? And so how do you know I'm not doing it now? No. Yes. Well, you could verify it. You could go on the internet, find a Bible translation, search for these words, see if they're in the mouth of Jesus. They are. Okay. It's is that Nutella? Yeah. Oh, very nice. Yes. I mean, I went to the source for Nutella. I didn't know about Nutella until I had a German exchange. And then I went to Germany. I had Nutella. Yeah, they put it on everything. Very nice. Did you ever have one? No. 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 As you, someone brought you, or no, Nestor. Is that Reeves Taylor? You haven't enjoyed your Nesquik yet? Oh no, you brought Nesquik. That help you play soccer better or choose an energy boost? Kind of happy because the international break's over, so my soccer team playing again this week. Leicester City, which stinks. Also Crystal Palace and Queens Park Rangers. Anyways, no, it is true. At one point, Jesus says to his followers, he says, you know, people think that I've come to bring peace to the world, but I haven't. I've come to bring a sword. I've come to divide households. A father against his son, a mother against her daughter. I did not come to bring peace. I've come to cast fire upon the earth. Woo! Jesus, tell me what you really think. Well, what does Jesus mean by that? Well, again, what does Jesus mean by that? You're sitting there on your lonesome. Well, I was going to say reading the Gospel of Luke. Sorry. No, you could be. I don't know. Maybe someday you'll get saved and you can read it. But you know, you're sitting there and it's just you. You know, what am I to make of this? I thought Jesus was the peace and love guy. You know, they're like, hey, Jesus, okay. I died for your sins. You're forgiven. Do what thou wilt. No, wait, that's Wicca, right? Wicca. That's not Christianity. The witches and the warlocks do what thou wilt. No. Jesus is not a do what thou wilt. No, Jesus is like, no, I've come to bring a sword, you know, I'm a soldier. I've come to attack people. I've come to destroy relationships. People will have to decide against me or for me. Are you going to follow me or not? So how do I interpret this? It would be helpful if I had someone authoritative who could lead me in the right direction so that I don't deviate, maybe come up with a weird view of Jesus, like a militaristic view of Jesus. That maybe is what Jesus is calling me to do. You know? Buy a sword and go out and convert people by the sword. You know? Hurt or die. You know? Cause chaos and destruction. You know? Break up families. Because that's what Jesus said he'd come to do. If that's what Jesus did really mean that? Well, that's the question. Did Luke mean that when he's writing down Jesus' words? Is that like observant? Yeah. This is just one example. You can take all sorts of examples from Jesus and other stuff in the Bible, and you know, people have. You can come up with all sorts of cults and things. Oh, right. I mentioned a little update on my Indian thought. Little update on my Indian. He's still looking for converts. Okay? It's kind of like the healthcare exchanges, you know, the sign-up period is still open. Got my eye on some people. I don't care. I'm getting paid for months. Anyways, so that's the why of the magisterium. Why does it matter? Okay. Because the magisterium, we have a magisterium. We already know about the magisterium. Are you trying to open though? What is that?
I'm trying to condense the term.
Oh, you're trying to put it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You know, we already have that. We call it the Supreme Court. It's a magisterium. Exactly the same thing, but from a purely secular view. You know, you need an ultimate authority to interpret the revelation, you might say, of the U.S. Constitution and what it means to modern questions or questions that were not foreseen by the Founding Fathers. Okay? Same kind of idea. You don't want deviations. So you have people who have experience in law, and a lot of times they don't have to be judges. I don't even think they have to be lawyers as well. I think the Constitution, here's another thing, I mean, for the appointment of judges, I think the Constitution is kind of open-ended. just whoever the president appoints. I'm thinking he's the confirmation of the Senate. That's kind of a courtesy that presidents pay to the Senate. But I mean, if they rejected a candidate, I don't think there's any impediment to president saying, well, I'm still going to go forward with, you know, my candidate that you don't like. She's still going to be a Supreme Court justice when you elect her. But yeah, so you need some kind of authority that's going to, so not just religious, but you see this in other places. So to save us from deviations, not going off to the right way. This doesn't fit in with our view of a free democratic society. So this law is unconstitutional. Okay? Or this does, so it's fine. Same thing with religion. This does not fit in with our view of who Jesus was or what Jesus wanted. So I'm sorry, we can't accept it. So maybe people leave the church, or they say, well, fine, we'll go found our own group with these beliefs. All right, fine. But we're not going to change. You want to be in the Catholic Church? Then you accept our decision. Well, we don't. Okay, fine. You found your own community, you know? Well, don't. We don't want you to leave. We'd like you to come over to our view, but if there's a separation, and you know, which there has been in Christian history, it happens on serious issues. So that's the why of the magisterium, to keep people in the truth, to make sure that the relationship is true. Now, wait a second. Oh, that's right. That's right. It's authentic. Because if it's not, then what are you really doing? You know? If you're online and you make friends with somebody somewhere else on the globe, you know, and you spend, you know, a few weeks or months, you know, chatting with the person, you know, getting to know the person, liking the person, entering into a relationship, you're like, hey, let's meet. You know, finally, I want to meet you. You usually want to meet. You don't want to just keep it virtual. For a real relationship, people want to be in the presence of the other person. They want the full encounter. They don't want virtual encounter. You know, and you find out that it's been a chat bot for the last 3 months. You know what I'm saying? You're just talking to a bunch of algorithms that were putting together bits of information creatively, generatively, as they say. And there really was no soul behind it. There was no one to go meet, unless you wanted to go like to some computer center where all the whatchamacallits are. What do they call those things? Terminals, where all the information and stuff is going through. Or you find out the person's deceptive, you know? Like you're on a dating site and someone puts a picture and he looks great or she looks great, you know? Virile if he's a man, you know? Healthy if she's a woman, I guess. Or maybe a virile woman. I don't know which way. You never know. Anyways, and you meet the person and find out it's like, you know, a 90-year-old grandpa or somebody. I just wanted to talk with somebody. I didn't think you'd come and see me if you didn't think I looked like this. You want the relationship to be authentic. So that's what the magisterium is trying to do, to guarantee that it can be as authentic as possible. Not necessarily perfectly authentic. There might still be more to learn and more to think. And maybe sometimes the magisterium, the bishops, the leaders might sometimes make assumptions based on the time they're living in that turn out to be wrong. You know, like they might have, if they're living in the Middle Ages, they might have assumed that the sun moved and that the earth did not. Okay, so you had a geocentric solar system, which is an oxymoron, right? But you know what I mean. that the Earth was the center of the solar system. I keep going back. I can't do it. I'm a modern. Was the center of the planets and the sun and the stars. And if someone told them otherwise, they would probably have rejected the view. Well, they did. You have people like Galileo, the famous Galileo trial, where the scientist was put on trial for heresy for making that claim because it contradicted the Bible. But they were reading the Bible from the perspective of 17th century science, 17th century astronomy, and assuming that it was accurate and correct, right? Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? I mean, they weren't astronomers. They were bishops, popes. They weren't men of science. So they were assuming what the consensus view of the scientists for a long, long time was right. And that Galileo, this man Galileo, was wrong. Well, we now know that, of course, that he's right. He was right. At least about the sun. At least about being a heliocentric, being a solar system and not an Earth system, that the sun is at the center of the system of planets and we go around it. He was wrong about other things. But again, he was living in the 1600s. So of course, I'd expect him to be wrong about some things, even scientific things, But he was trying. So the church is the same way. The church might be wrong about some things about God or about Jesus in some ways. They might make assumptions based on when they're living, Might assume that Jesus, was a capitalist or he's down with capitalism. Jesus never talks about economic theory, but, what if you found out Jesus were more of a communist in his views of how the economic system should be organized? There should be no private ownership. It should all be shared. Okay. Revelation and inspiration. Well, this does tie into what revelation and inspiration is, because revelation can be perfect and yet have to develop, have to be understood. Okay, it's perfect from God's side because God is perfect. The problem is not with God. It's not like, when people read the Bible and encounter the God of the Bible, they're like, but God says this here and says that there. He says X in this book and says Y in the other book and then Z in the other book. So, what's going on here, Well, that's not a problem for God because you're still trying to read it like it's an actual love letter from God, all right? That God actually himself wrote, rather than you're neglecting the human beings that intervened, right? I went over this, right? Talked about Dei Verbum, the human authors who intervened. You're reading the human authors. You're not reading God, and humans are imperfect. Okay. Vatican I already talked about. The First Vatican Council, I gave you the background on it, is what I mean. Okay, and I told you that it ended because of a war. They were, the bishops all got scared and stuff like that, that they were going to be invaded and they're all going to be kind of held hostage there. So they ran away. So the council was never formally ended. However, it did, before it kind of ended informally, Mr. McKillop, they did come out with a couple of documents, one of which we're concerned with here. The other one had to deal with the nature of the papacy and the role of the papacy. But they also put one out on the Catholic faith, the dogmatic constitution on the Catholic faith. Notice dogmatic constitution, just like the dogmatic constitution on divine revelation of Vatican II, right? So if it's a dogmatic constitution, talking about what constitutes dogma, official teaching, Ms. Cobb, it's a high, and it comes from a council with the Pope at it, comes from a high level of authority, It should be believed. Doesn't have to be. That's de fide doctrine, That's of the faith. Like you have to believe in God, the existence of God, or you just can't be a Catholic. That's de fide, of the faith. But it's close. It's high up there. I should really believe this. And I do. So it's a statement of very high authority called Dei Filius. Okay? Dei Verbum, right? Dei Verbum. Right? So you kind of notice Notice the connection, I think, that I do think the bishops were trying to make there in the title. Dei Verbum, and this is Dei Filius, the Son of God, okay, the first two Latin words of the document. So that's what you say in shorthand, but the official thing is dogmatic constitution, was it De Fide Catholica, on the Catholic faith. But really it's about revelation. It's about, the interrelationship between faith and reason. And what's the reason this matter relates or revelation. Okay. So there's a picture of Pope Blessed Pius IX. Seems like a happy guy. I think he might have been one of the first popes to have actually been photographed. And there's St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. You can see the country. Basically, you see almost the whole country of Vatican City right here. It's all facing Vatican City. This is the environs of Rome. Okay, so this is the country of Vatican City. And the offices of the Curia, as they're called, the bureaucracy that helps out the Pope. So a council is simply a meeting. That's all it is. You know this word. There's no religious context to it. You have a student council in high school. We have a council here at the college, So it's a meeting. In this case, in the religious sense, it's a meeting of the bishops, the leaders of the church, to decide matters of belief and practice, teaching and discipline, okay? And it was a universal council, just like Vatican II. All the bishops of the world who could come did come, and it was headed by the Pope of Rome. All right. This is from the document. I don't think I have you read the document or ask you to read it. No, I don't think it's part of the readings, is it, Ms. Prawl? I don't think it's on the syllabus. I don't give you excerpts from it, but they're here in the PowerPoint. So would anyone like to read this from chapter 4, Dei Filius, this little snippet, this quotation, Dei Filius? Ms. Casada, what do you think? Thank you, Ms. Casada.
That there is a two-fold missions, not only as regards its work, also as regards its form. With regards to the truth, we know that as the according to the Lord by not to reasoning, other before learning mind.
Okay, keep going.
With regard to the object, there are both for our beliefs is turning and getting in God, but unless we are
Excellent. So Dei Filius chapter 4. Okay, so there's twofold way that we know things. Through the reason that we have according to our human nature, we are rational animals. We can think, we have intellect, we have understanding, Mr. Barnett, so we can understand the world around us. But there's another level which is supernatural. It's above human nature. Okay? And that comes from God, which is belief. We call it divine faith. Okay? It's believing in God because he reveals something. Or confirms something. Some things we can know about God simply through reason. So like the existence of God is knowable through just the exercise of human reason, even morality, like what God wants, how people should act and treat each other. You don't need a God to tell you not to kill the innocent, I don't think, not to tell an untruth. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That seems pretty logical. I don't think I need a God to tell me that. And the church would say, yeah, you're right, you don't. You can know those things simply through human reason. So of course you find human beings all over the planet through history who came up with these same ideas, They believed in God, they believed in the golden rule, don't do to others what you don't like, They said don't lie, don't kill, blah, 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 blah. But there are other things which are beyond the level of our reason to know. We simply cannot know them. We have to be told them. And in the case of God, that requires faith or belief. But just because it's God, it's not like, oh, that's faith. It's not reasonable. No, faith, as I think I told you before, faith, belief ties in even to our relationships. Any relationship is based on trust. I mean, I trust that you're telling me the truth about yourself. And I can only know things about you if you reveal them, you uncover them to me. Some things I can know about you just from my senses and my reason. I can use my senses and my reason. I can see what you look like. All right? Skin color. All right? Language. Like you're speaking a certain language or something. From your name. I can assume that you have a certain name. That's usually, you don't want to stereotype, obviously. But, you can make that assumption. Maybe it's not true, though. Sometimes it might not be true. But a lot of times it seems to be true. Like say, I try not to say it too often to students, because I don't want to put anyone on a spot or make anyone feel uncomfortable. Because I just I'm fascinated, by stuff. But you don't want to make people uncomfortable, so I don't really ask any. Nevertheless, I'm using my senses as I see you. I see your gender, at least your biological gender. However, as we know very well today, I can't see into your mind. I can't see how your mind identifies you or what your mind feels like, what gender your mind feels, or even genders for some people. What pronoun do I call you today? Are you he today? Is she? A they? Is her? Now, what are you? Because some people are multi-gender. And then, of course, there are the ones who have no gender at all. And I don't know what to do with that. I'll have to encounter it. Again, encounter. So I can know it through my natural reason, but then you have to reveal it to me and I have to take it on faith that that's how you feel. Okay? I can see biologically that you look like this gender, but I'm taking it on faith that you don't feel that way. Or you don't identify it. I can see a person, there are people who, I can give examples, but it's touchy. We talk about what people look like and stuff like that. It's very touchy. I don't mean anything by it, but I don't want to get fired either. I don't want to say something that's can be misinterpreted or maybe even correctly interpreted, And then it's like out the door, they're up the contract. But I think you know what I'm getting, all right? I can assume, like, if a person is walking around with prosthesis for a leg, has one leg and then another, that there was some kind of either accident or birth defect, or are we allowed to call them birth defects? Because people can be born without arms and legs. They don't develop in the womb, okay, during the pregnancy. But it could also be, if I see the guy's dressed in an army uniform, I'm going to assume it was in battle, it was an accident or something. Something blew up or something happened. He was in his service or her service. Using my reason. But the person could be like, no, this had nothing to do with my service. I was out surfing one day and a shark showed up, Nothing to do with me being a soldier at all. Oh, okay, you've uncovered that for me. So my assumption was true, Mr. McMaster, based on just my logic and what I was seeing in my experience. But when the person revealed, I thought, okay, that's not true. There was an accident of sort, but it wasn't the kind of accident. Why can that not happen in religion? People get all jittery and shuddery when it comes to, like, religion. Yeah. That's gonna Go with God, my friend. Anyways, you get to religion, and all of a sudden, and I agree. I sometimes get butterflies in my stomach. Do I really believe? Is what I really believe really true? Is it really authentic? Stuff. How do I know? Okay, but those same questions can be. You can extend the hypothesis to all of our knowledge. Well, we need to know what the church wanted to affirm in Dei Filius is that both forms of knowledge are valid. Both our use of reason and our choice to trust are valid. Because people were questioning that in the 1800s. Okay? There were some people who were saying, just have faith. You don't need to think about it. And there are other people who are saying, reason is the only sure guide. Belief and by extension, religion is, believing without evidence. So, it really means nothing. And the church was saying at Vatican I, condemning both views, challenging both views, saying, no, that's not our view. We accept the fact that we have minds to think with. And, we have to make assumptions. So we have, even about God. So at some point, and even God can reveal stuff to us. But we have to trust it until we have a reason not to trust it. You get new information, but that pertains to everything, even the natural sciences. So it's really defending science in a way. Or it is defending science, the possibility of science. So God reveals himself. So natural reason and faith. How does God reveal himself? Well, God reveals, he enters into a relationship naturally, according to the nature that we have. If you want to know more about God, you can take Christian Faith with me next term, and I have 3 or 4 classes where I ramble on about the Lord. It's not a full-fledged theology. I mean, it is theology, religious studies, but I'm not dealing with the philosophy or the theory of God, so I'll assume you understand the Judeo-Christian model for God. There's one God who is completely perfect, completely good. Okay, he is spiritual. He is not doesn't have a body. He doesn't have parts. However, he's the creator of the natural world, and he can reveal himself naturally through nature. Okay, nature is simply what something is. Okay, yes, we usually use it, I think, for the trees and bushes, the birds, the flies, and us. We're part of nature too. But really, nature is simply what something is. Okay? And it comes from the Latin word nascor, which those of you who took Latin know is a deponent verb. Yes, Ms. Cobb? Yes? Yes, Ms. Tran? Deponent verb? Yes? Yes? Which means what, Ms. Taylor? Which means that it is in the passive form, conjugated passively, but it takes an active to be. Nasco. Something to be born. So birth. So that concrete idea of being born. All right. What something is. Whatness. Quiddity, Ms. Harrison. But, well, it's not exactly the same as nature, but anyways. When the nature has what it actually is, and it's kind of quiddity. So God can use nature. Now, already kind of reveals himself to us and can be known by consideration of our world, starting with ourselves. That's the first thing we really start to know is ourselves as we're developing even in the womb. Apparently the fetus can feel things, and as the brain and the nervous system are developing. Okay. I mean, it's not like the kid's Albert Einstein, like I was saying before. But it's in a rudimentary fashion. The brain is there, and the other organs start to develop. Okay, as your mom will tell you, any of your moms tell you that you moved around a lot when you were in their bellies? Any of you told that by your mom? You were a hard kicker? Some mothers will play music, put headphones or whatever on their bellies to play music. Did your mom ever tell you she did that for you? Yeah. Play Mozart or something, or rock music or something, you know. You go to sleep and you're awake in the womb, from what I understand. That's just what I've heard women say who've been pregnant. They know after a period of time, you know, there are periods of movement where the baby's moving around, and then a period of time where the baby's just there. So it seems like baby's gone to sleep and then baby's awake, you know. So that's your experience. That's your primordial experience in the womb. But you also start experiencing things outside of you. You recognize, I'm assuming this as a human being. I could be wrong, but tell me if I'm wrong. You start realizing there's a world outside of you. Even in the womb, the fetus can seemingly hear the voice of the mother, probably hear the beat of her heart, I would imagine, and the sounds of the her internal organs. But, you know, and can even apparently recognize, apparently, I'm assuming, you know, you have to make an assumption here. But, you know, like dad shows up and all of a sudden, ooh, she kicked. She knows you're here, you know? You start realizing that you're not the only center of existence. Even if you can't even conceive of those ideas right now, you just simply know you are there, you exist, you simply take that for granted, with all the needs and drives that you have, you know, the need to eat and, you know, to get rid of waste. The need for love. Oh, yes, that's a big thing. You know, it's very important for a mother to hold her baby, and the same thing for the father, but for any of the parents. And even not even parents, but just to be held after birth and be shown love, even if it's not the actual parent. Apparently, that has a parent. That has psychological effects. Certainly for the parents, it's a bond. It really is a bonding moment with the child. At least appears to be. I mean, those of you who are doing social work and stuff, maybe you're taking, you know, child development or something like that for your psychology part of social work and stuff, or maybe they just go over child development. But yeah, these things, I've heard these things. I'm not an expert, but I've just heard these things. So I could be wrong, but the sources I heard them from seem to be legitimate. So there's already a revelation kind of going on, even before birth in some way. And you could even say, in some way, God is already there revealing himself in some way. And then you're born, and then you're plopped out into the world. And you start seeing all this stuff that's here without you. You know I didn't make all this stuff. I didn't make any of this stuff. You know, some of it I did, obviously, over my lifetime. You know, I've made some things. I've made some things that didn't exist before, painted some pictures, you know, written some things. Okay, so yeah, but not a lot. But I didn't make the trees. I didn't make the planet. I didn't make the Milky Way galaxy. I know I didn't make these things. So where did they come from without me? Who made them? What made them? What does the world tell me? What can I know about the thing that made them? What can my reason tell me about? I'm not saying even that there's a God, but just, is there a source of existence? What is it? What is the world? So there's already kind of a natural revelation going on there. God bless you. And God is speaking through nature. But, it's nature, and if God is not that, if God is super nature, beyond the natural world, spiritual, then he's not exactly as I'm experiencing the natural world. So there's another order of knowledge called supernature, supernatural. And it's distinct. It's not part of the physical material world. And this comes from God's side, from the supernatural side. As with any person, if God is personal, I believe he is, if you're having a relationship with him, then I can't force whatever that source of existence is to tell me what it is, if it's there, if I think it's there. Whatever made all of this come to be, including myself, gave me consciousness, because I know I didn't give myself consciousness. Well, it comes from your genes. Okay, yeah, but I'm not a geneticist, but I know I've seen enough documentaries on genetics and stuff like that to know that genes are not the end all and be all. They don't exist in and of themselves. They come together from your parents. Your father and your mother, their DNA comes and melds together, and becomes you. And the genome is formed within you, a new genome. Okay? Genes are like switches, Some genes are turned on, some are turned off. And if you know how to turn on certain switches, then that's good. I mean, that's what they're trying to use genetics for, all sorts of things, like fighting cancer, trying to find the genes that deal with that. If you turn them off, then you will be less prone to cancerous tumors. I saw this fascinating experiment that was done on a bug, not a fly. It was it was a moth that fluoresces. It's on its wings. Fluorescent meaning gives off light on its wings, they got the genome of this moth, and they were able to identify the gene that controlled the fluorescence. And to test that they had it, they took another moth and they turned it off, this gene that they thought controlled the thing that created light, or not really light, but with the fluorescence, okay? Light to emit from the wings of the moth. And lo and behold, the moth stopped fluorescing. Didn't happen anymore because they turned the switch off. So I know it kind of like how genes are, they're like switches, on and off. But who's got the finger that's deciding which switches that I received from my mom and dad should be turned on and should be turned off? That I should have blonde hair like my mother and not really dark black hair like my father. That I should have been male and not biologically male and not biologically female. Or both, because sometimes that happens. Very rarely, but yes, who Sarah said. Why was I saying that? Oh, genes, because some people want to say it's all genetics. 150 years ago, it would have been, or even not even, maybe 50, 60 years ago, it's all evolution. For when genetics is still in its infancy, genetic studies. It's all evolution. That's how we evolved. We developed characteristics and some of them died out or became not necessary, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. But that just pushes the question farther down, as they say, kicks the can down the road. It doesn't actually grab the can and say, what are you? What's inside you? Okay? So we can't make that thing, that source of existence, reveal itself if it doesn't want to. God decides how and when he wants to do it. And and the reason why he wants to do it. So, for example, in Revelation, God could tell us things that we already know. Like, as I told you, we can know that God exists just through the use of natural reason. Just through thinking about it, thinking it through. It's a very simple process, okay? One of the most basic arguments for the existence of God, there are many, but, the fact that nothing in the universe seems to be the source of its own existence. Contingency, as the philosophers call it. from the Latin word tango. Tango tangere. Tetegi hakum. How's it going? Good. Contingency. Nothing is the source of its own existence. I know that I didn't create myself. I didn't make myself. I didn't will myself into being. Nor did someone do that to my parents, nor before them, nor even before there were human beings. You know, I know the planet didn't will itself into existence, nor did the solar system, nor apparently did our galaxy, or the black hole at the center of our galaxy. So you keep going back. Is there something that you can finally arrive at that exists simply of itself? It's not contingent on anything for its existence. It is the source of its own existence. And of course, and in fact, existence, you can then extrapolate, flows out of that. Maybe, you know, it's philosophy. And also, you know, philosophical theology. But yeah, you can make a rational, purely rational argument, not appealing to the Bible or the Quran or any other religious text, for the existence of a God, what you might call a God. It's another word. Yeah. And God might reveal that, you know? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. All right, the first verse of the Bible, the Jewish scriptures. All right. Obviously, there's a God. You're right, there is a God, you know, because it mentions a God, you know, that exists, who made everything. Okay. So it's kind of telling us what you could already know. Don't kill people who don't deserve killing, you know, or don't harm people who don't deserve to be harmed. You don't need a God to tell you that. Or revelation could be that a God or something tells us something we didn't necessarily know, but that we could have known. You know, you might know that there is a divinity or a source of being, of existence, but is that source singular, unitary? Is it multiple? Are there distinct facets to it? Like many gods, one might say? Just one sole God, maybe? I don't know. I think you could reasonably, you know, think that, or that there should only be one God, because existence, I think, is unitary. But anyways, that's, you know, another conversation. And how you should act. I mean, should you have, well, is marriage a good thing or not? You know, and if you do this thing that we call marriage, this relationship, should it be only with one person? Can it be with many people? Can it be ended at some point in time? Can you know, have a time limit on it? You know, I'll be married to you for a year and then I'll marry somebody else, you know? A temporary marriage, in a manner of speaking. You maybe could rationalize to say, you know, probably monogamy is the best because, well, how do you give your attention to a whole number of people? I'm not just talking about sexual attention, but psychologically and emotionally. How do you give, you know, an equal, fair amount of attention to all of your wives or all of your husbands or all of your lovers if you're polyamorous and you don't believe in marriage, but all of your sexual partners, right? It's more logical to just focus on one. That seems to be all we can handle. But, you know, you could still make the argument, and human experience tells us that other cultures disagree with that, you know. Can have many wives, many husbands, many partners, concubines. So you could know it rationally, but you know, you don't necessarily know it. So God reveals it that I'm one God. And oh yeah, when you get married, you should only have one spouse. You see this in the Bible. People again get all shuddery and worried. Well, King David had all sorts of wives and concubines to boot. Who kind of like a concubine's kind of like a legitimate mistress. You know what I'm saying? It's like your wife knows that you have her and she's okay with it. That's your concubine. Because of course, having sex with your wife was not sex with your wives was for children's sake. Concubines were fun. They were for fun. Because that's how I interpret it. Okay. The Jews were not at the point where they understood that marriage was between a man and one wife. Later they did, but at the time that King David was apparently living, no. And in fact, they saw that as a blessing of God, that God gave him many wives and many concubines. So God was blessing him. He had more than just one wife. But then it was like, and you could divorce them. If you didn't like the wife, then you just got rid of her. You gave her a bill of divorce. But then later God starts revealing, that's not the way I really want it to be. That's what you've been doing, assuming that I approved of it. But now I reveal to you that no, I don't really approve of it. Could you have figured that out for yourself? Yes. But now you know. Or, in Revelation, God can tell us something that we completely could not have known at all. Like that God is three persons. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You can know, I think it's logical to believe in one God, but that God is both singular, unitary. Man, are they leaving class early? Not in this class. Not on my watch, Miss Crystal. The idea that God could be unitary and yet plural, it's a paradox. It doesn't make any sense, Miss Quesada, right? As I said, it's like an oxymoron. A plural unity or a unified plurality. How does that work? And we can get into all, if you want to discuss it, New Christian faith, we get into all the discussion of, well, there's a difference between separation and distinction and stuff like that. Okay, fine. But, to a lot of people, it can still seem like, well, you're trying to say there's one God, but there's really three gods. And like, you want to eat have your cake and eat it too, right? There's Paul, Christians want to still have the one God of Judaism, but then still have that kind of little pagan inclination for many gods, so they bring in the persons of the Trinity. Yeah. Yeah, it's a paradox. Paradox. Okay, of course it's mathematically impossible, right? Really? You don't know. You don't know what 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus. If you keep adding 1 to 1,
then you would find out.
What do you mean?
If you kept adding on to it, you'll simply get it.
Well, but if I add 1 and 1 to 1, don't I end up with a sum of 3? Always? Yeah, it's addition, right? So how can I add 2 other persons to the one person of God and still have 1? That doesn't work mathematically, does it?
Based on that.
Okay. But math is a form of logic, it's a form of reason. What do you think it's based on, if not math? Oh, beliefs. Irrational? That could offend me. I want to say I'm a goofball. All right, fine. Right? Come on, my math people. Math camp? Mathletes? Anybody? Mathlete? You turned your head. That's a tell. That's a tell. You gave it away.
science.
Oh, come on, math and science go hand in hand, right? Really? I mean, I love science too, but I can't do math for nothing. It just doesn't register in my brain. No way I'm gonna play physics. That is not gonna happen. All right. Yeah, no, I mean, mathematically it doesn't work. Well, depends on what kind of math you're using, right? Depends on what kind of math you're using. So you gotta use Christian math. Well, show me. No, it doesn't. One, Mr. Barnett, times one gives you what? If you times one 3 times, what does it give you? Multiplication, people. I mean, it's like this is second grade. One. Yep. Well, I mean, come on. I mean, I'm up here dying. You know, yeah. I mean, you can add 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000,000 ones. You're still going to come up with one. You don't have to stop at just 3. So really, kind of the logic of mathematics doesn't tell us anything about whether there can be a trinity or not. You have 3 gods. Well, 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. You know, yeah. But then change the equation, change the sign. Put a dot or an X instead of a plus sign. 1 plus 1 plus 1 is still 1. Well, how can that be? Paradox of mathematics. A lot of paradox. Is light a particle or is it a wave? How does it go through its energy, right? Is it? And you had to come to like the religious guy, find the truth, right? Okay.
Telling me different?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm asking you, does light go like this through a vacuum? Or does it go like this? Like that, like a wave. This is a particle that goes straight like a line, it's a particle. But you've used a flashlight, right, Miss Harrison? Yeah, I mean, you use it in the dark, I'm assuming. Yeah. So when you see the light, doesn't it seem to go straight ahead? Doesn't it seem to go in a line? Or does it come at all wavy? Yeah, so how can it be a wave? Well, as far as I know, you're the only one who confessed to learning something. So I'm going. It's both. It functions as both a wave and a particle. And no, physicists still don't know why. Because it seems like when they test light in experiments and things, like they shoot a laser through slits and stuff like that to see which side it's going to go through, the light seems to change. At one point it can be wavy and then it can be a particle. I don't know why it decides to do one and not the other, but it seems to be both. Maybe that's the only way light can truly exist and be light, you know? So, okay, a unified plurality, a plural unity. God tells us that's what he tells me in Revelation through his church, through his son, Jesus Christ. That's what he actually is. He's not just one God, single, alone. He has a son and what we call a spirit, and those are names, okay? I mean, they're real distinctions. There's a real distinction. They're not each other, okay? But the Jews didn't, you read the Old Testament, there's no idea of a Trinity or any part. I mean, that was what pagans taught. The prophets are very clear. I am the Lord. There is no other. There's only me. I have no other. I have no other. then how can he have a son? And it's explicit. I think it's in the prophet Isaiah. There's no one beside me. I have no companion. And then Jesus of Nazareth comes around and says, oh yeah, I don't have a human father. God's my actual father. He gave birth to me. I have a human mother. Oh, okay. That did not fit in with the Judaism that you'll read in the Old Testament. It was a revelation. Jesus revealed something about the nature of God. And people believed it or they didn't. They accepted it or they didn't. They followed Jesus or they wanted Mr. McMaster to kill him. If you want to talk about that, again, Christian faith, take that with me next semester. Why did Jesus die? If Jesus was such a great guy, so hey, peace. Jesus was such a nice dude. Why were there Jews that felt this guy has to go? He's dangerous. He's destroying our religion. Because of how he was talking about God and his relationship with God, which did not seem to make any sense. Just like, in the old theory of light, a wave. That made perfect sense to physicists 100 years ago. But then, you got modern physics and people start doing other experiments and they're like, wait a second, it's also a particle. Well, how does that work? Well, we don't know, but that's what the experiments are showing. There's only one God. There cannot be another until Jesus, and Jesus changes all of that for Judaism. God is also plural. So God tells us things that we couldn't have known. All right. How does this work? How does Revelation work? They have this, supernatural. All right, sorry. I did give a definition, sorry. The quality of being distinct from the physical material world. Okay, all right. Which is what we know. It's super, above nature. Some philosophers and theologians don't like that word, supernature, because, when, like Mr. McMaster, you say God is supernatural, right? You place God in the supernatural box. But being God's not supernatural to God, right? It's perfectly literal to God, Perfectly natural, being, I am what I am. Just like Popeye. Got a tattoo of him?
No, saying that doesn't mean.
Yeah, he eats spinach, right? Eats a can of spinach and becomes really powerful. Huh? Olive oil. Hito, the guy who's always trying to beat him up. And for some reason, he has these really deformed forearms, like immense, but his guns are like really tiny, puny, but his forearms are like Popeye. I am what I am. Anyways. So supernatural is not supernatural to God. It's precisely what he is, So it's not the best word, but all we have are words as humans, okay? God doesn't need words. Everything is immediately known to him. Okay, I already kind of talked about this. I'm going to skip over De Filius chapter 2. I already did intellect, didn't I, Ms. Quesada? Ms. Colony, I already told you about intellect, right? When I was doing faith. Ms. Tran, I did intellect, yes? Mr. Jastrzemski, help me out. Mr. Barnett, give him a poke. See if he's still up. I already did these terms, didn't I? Reason, intellect, yes. The will, okay, good. Now, why do I have that there? Well, that's interesting. Well, we'll have to read it. You're not required to have a Bible for this class, just the Binns book and the Catechism, right? No, wait, you are required to have the Bible. Okay, sorry about that. Thinking about religion and violence. So if you want to turn to the second letter of Peter, it's near the end of the New Testament, chapter 1. Someone can read this for us. The second letter of Peter. Could be by the man Simon Peter, who was one of the chief apostles chosen by Jesus. I believe it is. I don't think it was directly written by him. I think he used secretaries, and so someone wrote this for him. But I have no problem believing it's from him. Most New Testament scholars don't think so. They think someone was writing in the name of Simon Peter, using his name kind of like to give it a certain prominence or importance. Okay, but the arguments for that are not really too great because it's usually based on well, I shouldn't say usually. The argument is primarily based on language. We don't think that a Galilean fisherman would write this way. True. I guess. I'm assuming he didn't speak Greek, or if he did speak Greek, he didn't speak it well. But you know what? I didn't know the dude. Greek was a common language. It was the common language of business and education and government all throughout the Mediterranean. There's nothing to say he didn't speak it, but given what we know or seem to know about the literacy rates of Palestine in the first century, he was probably not a man who could read or write. Probably, but not necessarily, because he was also a businessman. Had a fishing business, so, he had to organize accounts some way. And as I said, when people wrote letters, they usually didn't write them themselves. They used other people, especially if they couldn't read and write. They'd say, I'll talk to you, tell you what I want to say, you write it down. And the secretary takes notes and copies down, verbatim what you said. But then later when writing the actual letter, we'll craft it, correct grammar, flesh out ideas that might be unclear, stuff like that. We know that this happened in letter writing in the ancient world. So it's not beyond the pale that come back to this next week. 2 Peter chapter 1. Why are we even reading this? Verses 1 through 7. Is it even in my notes? Thank you, miss. Have a good day. Thank you, sir. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, miss, have a good day. Good day, sir. Good day, Mr. Barnett. Mr. Eric Master, you want to teach history to high schoolers, eh?
Yes, sir. I do know that.
Because I saw I like to check out what my people are doing, their majors, what's in a crack. How I do.
Yeah.
Do you really want to enter that circle of health, sir?
Maybe. Yeah, I think so.
Well, you saw what happened when I asked about Little Bighorn, right?
Oh yeah, I was watching. I saw the that which is that was bad. Yeah, it's tough. So nobody answering one times one.
Yeah.
I have to submit a change of major form change of major form to add a math minor.
Yeah.
Part of that degree. So
How about a philosophy minor?
you can do a dual minors?
You could do a dual major, do philosophy, religious studies.
That'd be tough.
Well,
Because I'm also in the honors program and I'm a transfer
students
student.
still had to think,
Yes, sir.
especially as a historian, because
Yeah,
data is one thing,
absolutely.
but history is an art. You gotta tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You gotta understand. That's
You're on the outside, sir, so start looking and seeing, because what you're seeing is what you're gonna be dealing with worse.
yeah.
When you get it.
Yeah.
So don't be discouraged.
Excellent.
Well,
Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good one.
two. Hello, ladies. Jasmine, Rouse, good to see you both. Good to see you, Dr. Dunn. Thank you. Appreciate it. My people. All right, let's see here. Kind of, yeah, I mentioned her. Yes, yes, yes. 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 Not really. Let's see here. Really? Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. All right, so I'm gonna do that. All right, you guys are gonna do that. Whoops. Is religion violent? There we go. Now I gotta find. Hello, sir. Is that Mr. Henry? Hello, Mr. Henry. Bills are playing tonight, Mr. Henry. Do that. Bills are playing tonight, Mr. Henry. No, not really. My mom is though. She loves the what's his name? Josh Allen. Is that it? All right. So I'm gonna have to. Well, it's okay because it's online, so I'm not gonna worry about that too much. Reason Fest. Those Reason Fest. There it is.
Dr. Hector Aval is a
Dr. Hector. Now we want. Oh, that's interesting.
what I think about is like all our journeys we've come so far.
Ah, be quiet. All right, maybe I'll have to do that then. Oh, okay, so it's the first song. There we go. Okay. Whoops.